Liam sat at his workbench, his hands busy repairing a broken energy core from an old farming droid. The soft hum of his tools filled the small workshop. Outside, the wind howled through the barren landscape of the outpost. Nights were always quiet here, far from the bustling colonies. Liam preferred it that way. No drama, no noise, just him and his work. The knock came unexpectedly. It wasn't the friendly tap of a neighbor or the heavy thud of a delivery. This was hesitant, almost weak. Liam froze, staring at the door. He didn't get visitors, especially not at this hour. Another knock. This time, softer. Liam grabbed a wrench, more for comfort than defense, and approached the door. His heart thumped loudly in his chest as he pressed the button to open it. What he saw made him take a step back. A tall figure stood in the doorway, barely holding themselves upright. The dim light from his workshop cast an eerie glow on their shimmering crystalline armor, which was cracked and smeared with dark green blood. Their face, delicate, pale, and undeniably alien, was half covered by a hood. Their eyes, large and luminescent, locked onto Liam's with a mix of desperation and exhaustion. "Help, please," the alien woman whispered, her voice trembling. She collapsed forward, and Liam instinctively caught her. Her weight was lighter than he expected, but her body was cold, almost unnaturally so. Liam hesitated. He had no idea who, or what, this being was. A runaway, a soldier, a threat. But the sight of her injuries and the desperation in her voice overrode his caution. He dragged her inside, carefully lowering her onto an old cot in the corner of the room. The warmth of the workshop seemed to soothe her, but her breathing remained shallow. "What happened to you?" Liam asked, though he didn't expect an answer. He grabbed his medkit, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. He wasn't a doctor, but he patched himself up enough times to know the basics. The alien's hand shot out, grabbing his wrist. Her strength was surprising despite her condition. "No, trackers," she murmured, barely audible. Liam frowned, then realized what she meant. He set down the medkit and searched her armor. Hidden under a shoulder plate, he found a small blinking device, a tracker. Whoever had hurt her probably wasn't far behind. With a quick motion, he removed the tracker and crushed it under his boot. The alien woman seemed to relax, her grip on his wrist loosening. "Thank you," she whispered before falling unconscious. Liam stared at her for a moment, his mind racing. Who was she? Why had she come to him? And what kind of trouble had she brought to his doorstep? The answers would have to wait. For now, he had to keep her alive. Outside, the wind howled louder, as if warning him that the peace of his quiet outpost was about to shatter forever. Liam's hands moved quickly, patching up the alien woman's wounds as best as he could. Her skin felt strange under his touch, smooth like glass, but with an odd warmth that pulsed faintly. The green blood oozing from her cuts smelled faintly of ozone. It was nothing like the injuries he had seen on humans before, but he worked with what he had. Every few minutes, Liam glanced at the door. Crushing the tracker had been the right call, but it didn't guarantee their safety. Whoever had sent that thing would be looking for her, and now they might be looking for him too. The alien stirred, her eyes fluttering open for a moment. Her glowing gaze met Liam's, and she whispered something in a language he didn't understand. It sounded sharp, rhythmic, almost like music. Liam sighed and shook his head. "I don't understand you," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "Just stay still. You're safe here, for now." The woman blinked a few times, struggling to focus. Then, as if forcing herself, she spoke again. This time, her words were in broken but clear English. "You helped me. Why?" Liam hesitated. He didn't have a good answer. "You were hurt. What was I supposed to do? Let you die on my doorstep?" Her expression softened, and for a moment, Liam thought he saw relief or gratitude in her eyes, but it was fleeting. Her face tensed, and she sat up too quickly, wincing in pain. "You should not have done that," she said, her voice strained. "What are you talking about?" Liam asked, frowning. "You were bleeding out. If I hadn't helped, You're in danger now." Her voice was firmer this time, though still weak. "They will come for you. They will not stop." "Who's they?" Liam demanded, leaning closer. "Who are you running from?" She hesitated, glancing around the workshop as if expecting the walls to collapse any second. Then she whispered, "HFY Syndicate. They hunt me. Because of what I know." Liam's stomach dropped. The HFY Syndicate was a name he'd heard before. An interstellar organization known for its ruthless tactics and control over advanced technologies. They didn't just hunt people, they erased them, leaving no trace behind. "Why me?" Liam muttered, more to himself than to her. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling inside him. "I'm just an engineer. I'm not equipped for whatever this is." "You're human," the alien said simply, as if that explained everything. Her tone carried an odd weight, like she had chosen her words carefully. "And humans, they surprise me." Before Liam could respond, a distant sound broke through the howling wind. A low mechanical hum that sent chills down his spine. It was faint but growing louder. "They found us," the alien said, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam's heart raced. Whatever peaceful life he had was gone. And in its place, a storm of danger and mystery was closing in. The hum of the approaching machines grew louder, sending a wave of panic through Liam. His hand shook as he quickly grabbed a nearby metal toolbox and tossed it under the workbench. Every instinct in him screamed to hide, but he couldn't just leave her there. The alien woman, Cyril, was still weak, struggling to stay upright. She grasped Liam's arm tightly. "We need to move," she urged, her voice sharp despite her exhaustion. "They will tear this place apart looking for me." Liam nodded, though he had no clear idea where they could go. His small workshop on the edge of the outpost was isolated, but it wasn't safe from the Syndicate. Not now. The walls were thin, and the windows were already shaking under the force of the machine's low-frequency hums. Cyril staggered toward the door, and Liam followed closely, his heart pounding. They didn't have much time. "There's an old storage bunker nearby," she said as she moved with surprising speed for someone so injured. "We can hide there until they pass." Liam's thoughts raced. A bunker. Why didn't she mention it before? And more importantly, why did she trust him? It didn't make sense. He was just a mechanic, a regular human, with no special skills for dealing with alien hunters. "Lead the way," he said, his voice tight. Cyril hesitated before turning towards the back of the workshop, where a narrow path led into the dark. Liam followed her, but the weight of the situation didn't leave him. Who was she, really? And what was this secret she kept mentioning? As they reached the edge of the workshop, the humming sound grew deafening. The machines were close. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. Cyril stopped in her tracks and turned to Liam. Her glowing eyes met his with a mixture of determination and sorrow. "Listen to me," she said urgently, her voice low. "They won't stop at just finding me. They will tear apart everything you know. They will use you to get to me." Liam's chest tightened. He didn't want to get involved in some galactic war or chase, but he couldn't turn his back on her now, not after everything she'd said and done for him. "What do you mean?" Liam asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Who are you really?" Cyril took a deep breath, her body trembling slightly. "I'm not just some lost traveler. I'm from the Zveris, a race of beings who've been hunted by the HFY Syndicate for centuries. I defected, and now they want me back. They won't stop until they've captured me. And when they do..." She trailed off, her eyes dark with the weight of the unspoken words. Liam's mind reeled. The Zveris, a race he'd heard about only in the most secretive whispers, a race of beings with advanced technology and strange abilities. Before Liam could respond, the machines outside let out a loud, unmistakable roar. It was no longer a hum. It was a force, and it was heading right for them. "We don't have time," Cyril said, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "Move, now." Liam didn't need any more convincing. They sprinted down the dark path, the sound of their footsteps lost in the growing roar behind them. The bunker was just ahead, a small, camouflaged structure half buried in the earth. Cyril reached the door first and punched in a sequence of symbols on a hidden keypad. The door hissed open, revealing a dimly lit interior. They both slipped inside just as the ground shook beneath their feet. The machines were nearly on top of them. But for now, they were safe. As the door clicked shut, Liam felt the weight of the situation sink in. The calm of his life was gone, replaced by a whirlwind of danger, secrecy, and questions he didn't have answers to. And one thing was clear: Cyril wasn't just any alien. She was someone, something, far more important than he could have ever imagined. The walls of the bunker were thick, but the muffled sounds from outside were still unsettling. Liam leaned against the cool metal wall, trying to catch his breath. His heart was still pounding from the rush to the shelter, but now that they were inside, there was a brief moment of calm. Cyril collapsed onto a small cot in the corner, her eyes half closed as she tried to steady her breathing. Liam had never seen someone so exhausted, not even after the longest shifts he pulled on the outpost. "I thought we lost them," Liam said, his voice low, but filled with anxiety. He had to know more. "Who's after you? You said they're coming for both of us, but I still don't understand." Cyril sat up, her glowing eyes meeting his, filled with an intensity that made Liam uncomfortable. "The Hicker Syndicate," she said firmly. "You've heard of them." Liam nodded, though he was still unsure what exactly they were capable of. He had only heard whispers about the Hicker Syndicate, mostly from traders passing through, talking about them as if they were a myth. Some said they were a cartel of ruthless mercenaries, while others spoke of them as a shadowy organization controlling the galaxy's most powerful weapons. But whatever the truth was, the fear in Cyril's eyes told him they were real and dangerous. "They're not just mercenaries," Cyril continued, her voice growing more urgent. "They are much worse. They exploit races, mine them for resources, and take control of planets. They've enslaved whole civilizations before, and they have an army at their disposal that can crush anything in their path." Liam blinked, trying to absorb the weight of her words. "Why would they come after you, though?" Cyril's expression darkened. She seemed hesitant, her fingers twitching nervously as if trying to decide whether to speak. Finally, she spoke again, but her voice was softer, almost regretful. "I was once part of their operations, but I couldn't stand what they were doing. I fled before they could capture me." Liam's eyes widened. "You worked for them. How? Why?" "I was part of their research division," Cyril explained. "I helped them develop weapons and technologies, things that could control entire planets, civilizations. I was complicit, but when I learned the truth of their plans, how they intended to use humans next, how they wanted to break the very fabric of life itself, I couldn't stay. I ran. And now they're hunting me down." Liam was stunned. He had never imagined he'd be sitting in a bunker with an alien who had been so closely involved with one of the most feared organizations in the galaxy. "But why me?" he asked, still struggling to understand. "I'm just a mechanic, a regular guy. What could I possibly do?" Cyril locked eyes with him again, her gaze piercing. "Humans are unpredictable," she said, a hint of admiration in her voice. "Your ingenuity, your ability to create, to surprise. The Syndicate underestimated you, and that's why they'll lose. You have something they don't understand. And now, you're a target too." Liam's stomach twisted. He had thought his life was simple, just fixing machines and staying out of trouble. But now, everything had changed. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was part of something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. Outside, the sound of the machines searching the perimeter continued to echo. But inside the bunker, Liam and Cyril were locked in a new battle, a battle of survival against an enemy unlike any they had ever faced. The dim lights of the bunker flickered as Liam and Cyril sat in silence. Outside, the sound of the Hicker Syndicate's machines patrolled the perimeter, their mechanical hum a constant reminder that danger was never far behind. The bunker's walls were thick, but the feeling of safety was only temporary. Every minute that passed felt like a countdown, and Liam's mind raced with questions he didn't know how to answer. Cyril was leaning against the wall, her eyes closed in deep thought. Despite her injuries, she exuded a calm that Liam couldn't quite understand. He couldn't imagine what it was like to be hunted by such an organization, an enemy so powerful that even knowing their name was enough to strike fear into the hearts of entire planets. Yet Cyril didn't seem afraid, even as the machines drew closer. Liam stood up, pacing the small space. "We can't just sit here and wait," he muttered, frustration building in his chest. "We need to do something. They'll find us eventually. How do we stop them?" Cyril's eyes opened slowly, locking onto him. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "But running isn't enough. The Hicker Syndicate won't stop until they've caught me. And once they do, they'll use me as a weapon to destroy everything." Liam's mind raced, but he stopped pacing. "So what do we do? What's the plan?" Cyril stood up, wincing slightly as her injuries made themselves known. She straightened herself and met Liam's gaze. "I have a way to stop them, but it won't be easy. We need to find the last Zeverus outpost, hidden deep in the northern mountains. It's where the remaining rebels are hiding, and they have the resources we need." Liam frowned. "A rebel outpost? That sounds dangerous." "It is," Cyril replied. "But it's the only chance we have. The rebels have weapons and technology that can help us take down the Syndicate. We can't do this alone." Liam stood still for a moment, his heart racing. The idea of going to a rebel base and facing an army of mercenaries was terrifying. But what choice did he have? Cyril was right. Hiding wasn't going to solve anything. The Hicker Syndicate would keep coming, no matter where they went. It was time to fight back. "All right," Liam said, his voice firm. "We'll go. But we need a plan. We can't just walk into their territory without knowing what we're up against." Cyril nodded, her expression serious. "I've been in touch with the rebels. They know we're coming. But we'll have to move quickly. We can't afford to wait for them to catch up to us." Liam felt a sense of resolve wash over him. This wasn't the life he had planned, but it was the one he had now. The thought of standing up to an organization as powerful as the Hicker Syndicate seemed impossible, but Cyril believed it could be done. And maybe, just maybe, humans had something the Syndicate didn't understand, something they couldn't predict. The decision had been made. The journey to the rebel outpost wouldn't be easy, but it was the only chance they had to stop the Syndicate's destruction. Cyril moved toward the door of the bunker, and Liam followed. It was time to face the unknown. The journey to the rebel outpost was going to be harder than Liam had imagined. He had expected something more straightforward, perhaps a quick escape, a chance to regroup. But now, as Cyril and he crouched behind the rocky cliff that overlooked the canyon, Liam realized just how far from simple this was. "We're almost there," Cyril whispered, her voice low and careful as she peered around the edge of the rock. Her eyes were sharp, scanning the terrain below for any signs of movement. Despite her exhaustion, she still moved with the confidence of someone who had been through much worse. Liam was beginning to understand why she had such a calm presence. He had only known her for a short time, but already he could tell that Cyril wasn't someone to panic easily. The Hicker Syndicate, the rebels, the machines, they were all just pieces of a much larger game to her. But that didn't make the situation any less terrifying for Liam. The canyon below them was filled with shadows. The rocky landscape was wide open, with few places to hide. The only way forward was through the narrow path that led to the hidden rebel outpost. Liam felt exposed, But there was no turning back now. "Are you sure this is the best route?" Liam asked quietly, glancing at Cyril. "It looks risky." Cyril nodded, her face set in determination. "It's the fastest route, and we don't have time to waste. The syndicate is already closing in. If we take too long, we'll be trapped." Liam swallowed. "And what happens if we don't make it in time?" "We'll fight," Cyril said simply. "There's no other choice." Her words were cold, but they carried a weight of truth. Liam couldn't deny the reality of their situation. They had come this far, and if they didn't push forward, they would lose everything. They began their trek down the path, moving quickly but cautiously. Every sound made Liam's heart race. Every crunch of gravel underfoot, every distant whisper of wind. It felt like the canyon was closing in on them, as if the very earth itself was conspiring against their escape. "Keep your eyes open," Cyril whispered as they neared a ridge. "There are scouts from the syndicate out here. They'll be looking for us." Liam nodded, his hand instinctively moving to the blaster Cyril had given him. He wasn't a fighter, but he knew how to use a weapon. What choice did he have? If they were caught, the syndicate would do much worse than just capture them. They would make sure they never got a chance to fight back. As they neared the ridge, the distant hum of machinery echoed through the canyon. The syndicate's search drones were close. Liam could feel his pulse quicken. If they were spotted, they would be surrounded. "Stay low," Cyril ordered in a harsh whisper. "Let them pass. Then we move." Liam crouched low, his breath coming in shallow bursts as the machines came into view. They were massive, sleek, and built for speed. Their red searchlights swept over the landscape, scanning every crevice. Liam's stomach tightened as one of the lights moved in their direction. The drone hovered just a few feet above them, its searchlight flicking across the rocky ground. Liam held his breath, praying they wouldn't be seen. Seconds passed like hours. Finally, the drone moved away, continuing its search further down the canyon. Cyril exhaled slowly, a slight relief in her eyes. "Now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They didn't have time to waste. They moved swiftly, staying in the shadows, praying they wouldn't be spotted. The path ahead was dangerous, but the rebel outpost was within reach. It was their only hope. The air grew colder as Liam and Cyril moved deeper into the canyon. The sounds of the syndicate's drones had faded into the distance, but Liam's nerves remained on edge. Every creak of the canyon's rocky walls seemed louder than before. Every shadow felt like a potential threat. They had come so far, and yet the hardest part was still ahead. The rebel outpost was hidden just beyond a steep ridge, nestled in a narrow valley where the mountains protected it from aerial surveillance. But getting there was only the first step. Their true goal lay deeper within the rebel base, an advanced weapon system that could help them take down the Hikar syndicate for good. "This is it," Cyril said, her voice low, as they reached the top of the ridge. She motioned for Liam to stay low, and they crouched behind a large boulder to survey the area below. The outpost was quiet, more so than Liam had expected. He had imagined some kind of fortified base, bustling with rebels preparing for war. Instead, the place looked abandoned, almost eerie in its stillness. Liam furrowed his brow. "Where is everyone?" "They're hiding," Cyril replied, her eyes scanning the area. "The syndicate has been closing in. The rebels can't afford to make noise. The weapon we need is inside, but we have to get past their defenses first." Liam nodded, his heart thumping faster. This was it, the moment of truth. The rebels had the weapon that could stop the syndicate's plans, but getting to it meant facing everything they had. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but there was no turning back now. "We'll need to be quick," Cyril continued. "The syndicate scouts will be patrolling. They could show up any second. Once we're inside, I'll handle the codes for the weapon." Liam swallowed, glancing around. "And what do I do?" "Keep us safe," Cyril said with a serious look. "Distract anyone who gets too close. Just remember what we've talked about, and don't hesitate." With a deep breath, Liam nodded. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. He wasn't just protecting a workshop anymore. He was part of something that could change the galaxy. And somehow, that made him feel both terrified and alive. They moved swiftly across the open ground, keeping close to the rocks for cover. As they neared the entrance to the outpost, Cyril signaled for Liam to stay back. She approached a hidden panel near the entrance and entered a series of strange symbols. The door hissed open, and they slipped inside. The interior was dark and quiet. Liam could hear the faint sound of murmurs in the distance, but the hallways were empty. They moved through the corridors, staying in the shadows, every step measured. As they reached the control room, a voice echoed through the comm system, making Liam jump. Sector 3 secure, no sign of intruders. Liam froze, his heart racing. The rebels might be hidden, but the Syndicate's presence was still heavy. "We don't have much time," Cyril said, moving towards a terminal in the corner of the room. "I need to access the weapons control system. Hold them off for a few minutes." Liam nodded, gripping his blaster tightly. He wasn't trained for this kind of fight, but there was no other choice. He had to protect Cyril. The future of the galaxy depended on it. As he moved toward the door, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. They were coming. Liam's heart pounded. The heist had begun, and they couldn't afford to fail. Liam's grip tightened around his blaster as he stood at the door, listening. The footsteps were getting closer, heavy and deliberate, and his heart raced with every second. He glanced over at Cyril, who was already focused on the terminal, her hands moving swiftly across the keys. Her eyes were sharp, her expression set in a determined, almost fierce calm. She knew what was at stake, and so did he. Liam swallowed hard, trying to control his nerves. The sound of the approaching guards grew louder. There was no time left. "Cyril," Liam whispered, keeping his voice low. "Are you almost there?" Cyril didn't look up. "I'm almost in. Just keep them occupied a little longer." Liam nodded, stepping closer to the door. He could hear the guards now, their footsteps just outside the control room. They were only moments away from discovering them. He didn't have any experience with this kind of situation, but there was no choice. He had to act. With a deep breath, Liam stepped out of the room and into the dark hallway. He kept his head low, staying close to the walls, the blaster held firmly in his hands. The guards were turning the corner. Liam raised the blaster and fired a warning shot just above their heads. The guards froze, startled, then turned in his direction. Liam held his breath, hoping they wouldn't notice the small, hidden door behind him leading to Cyril. "Who's there?" One of the guards demanded, his voice sharp. "Come out where we can see you." Liam stepped back, making sure his face was hidden. He needed them to get closer. The guards advanced, their weapons drawn, eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. Liam's pulse quickened, but he remained still, waiting. He couldn't afford to miss. If he shot too early, he might give away Cyril's position. Finally, as one of the guards took another step, Liam fired again, this time hitting the wall just beside them. The noise rang out like a gunshot in the quiet space. The guards ducked, their weapons raised. "Get down," one of them shouted. The other pulled out a small communicator and sent out an alert. Liam quickly backed into the shadows, knowing he had only a few seconds before backup arrived. But he couldn't keep this up for long. "Cyril," he whispered urgently. "Now." From behind the door, Cyril's voice came through, steady and calm. "I'm in. The weapons system is online." Liam felt a surge of hope. He wasn't sure exactly what Cyril had done, but it sounded like they were on the brink of something huge. Outside, the sound of more footsteps echoed through the hallway. The guards had called for reinforcements, but it was too late. Cyril's next words made Liam's stomach drop. "The artifact is ready." Liam's mind raced. The artifact, the powerful Zevirus device they had come to find, was finally within their reach. Cyril had managed to unlock it. But what did that mean? Is it enough to stop them? Liam asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. It's more than enough, Cyril replied. Once activated, it will disable their fleet. But it comes with a price. Liam frowned. What kind of price? The artifact uses a lot of energy. It will drain my life force to power it. But it's the only way we'll stop them. Liam felt his heart skip a beat. She was willing to sacrifice herself. No, Liam said quickly, his voice firm. We'll find another way. Cyril's eyes locked with his. There is no other way. We both knew this was coming. With a final glance toward the door, Cyril activated the artifact. The room lit up with a bright, otherworldly glow, filling every corner with a power Liam couldn't comprehend. Outside, the ground trembled as the artifact's energy surged through the base. The fight had just begun, but now, with the artifact in their hands, they had a chance. Let me know if you'd like any changes or if you're ready for the next part. The bright light of the artifact still burned in Liam's eyes as he watched Cyril, her body now glowing faintly from the power surging through her. The air around them hummed with energy. For a moment, everything seemed suspended in time, the artifact's power radiating like a storm, and Cyril standing at the center of it all. Liam's heart raced, his mind screaming for him to do something, anything. He couldn't let her do this. She had already given so much. Cyril, stop, Liam shouted, rushing toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him with a look that was as calm as it was heartbreaking. It's too late, Liam, she said softly, her voice strained. This is the only way. The syndicate will be stopped, but at a cost. Liam felt his breath catch. The glowing energy from the artifact was intensifying, and he could see the toll it was already taking on Cyril. Her skin had grown pale, and her breath came in shallow gasps. Each moment, the artifact was draining more of her strength. You can't just give up, Liam protested, his voice cracking with panic. There has to be another way. We can't let them win, but I can't lose you. Cyril smiled faintly, her eyes filled with a mix of resolve and sadness. Liam, you've already done more than anyone could ask. You've helped me get this far. You've already proven what humans can do. What I'm doing now, it's my choice. The syndicate won't destroy anyone else, not with this. Liam shook his head, unwilling to accept it. He had spent too long fighting to get to this point, and he couldn't lose her. Not after everything they had been through together. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice low with desperation. There must be another way to use the artifact, something that doesn't cost your life. Cyril's eyes softened as she looked at him, but the glow of the artifact was starting to fade, its energy pulsing more erratically now. I've made my peace, Liam. The Zeveris people. We are born knowing that sacrifice may be required. And for the greater good, I can make that sacrifice. Before Liam could respond, the walls around them began to shake, the ground trembling beneath their feet. The syndicate's forces were arriving, too many to stop. Their time was running out. Liam's mind raced. He couldn't let this be the end. He had to do something. Without thinking, he ran to the control panel where Cyril had been working earlier, desperately trying to find a way to stop the artifact's power drain. His fingers moved quickly across the terminal's keys, but nothing seemed to work. The energy from the artifact had locked everything down. Cyril staggered to her feet, her body shaking, but she didn't collapse. Her eyes met Liam's, her voice weak but clear. Liam, it's too late. Trust me. This is the only way to save everyone. Liam took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. She was right. There was no other choice. If this was the only way to stop the syndicate and protect the galaxy, then he had to trust her. A deep, pulsing hum filled the room, and the ground shook harder. The energy from the artifact surged, then suddenly stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then the sound of the syndicate's machines outside went silent, their hums and mechanical noises vanishing completely. Liam looked up at Cyril, his breath caught in his throat. The syndicate had been stopped. The artifact had done its job. But at what cost? Cyril collapsed into his arms, her body drained. Her eyes were closed, and her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. And for now, the galaxy was safe. Liam held her, his heart heavy with the weight of her sacrifice. She had given everything for this moment. He promised himself, as the silence settled over the base, that he wouldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. Now, they had to make sure the syndicate stayed down. For good. Liam knelt beside Cyril, his hand pressed against her still chest. Her breathing was shallow, barely there, but she was alive. That was the only thing that kept his heart from completely breaking. The artifact's glow had dimmed, its power fading with the passing moments, and so had the threat of the syndicate. The air around them was strangely calm, like the world was holding its breath after a long and furious storm. Outside, the sounds of the machines and drones that had once filled the air had fallen silent, as if the universe itself had exhaled a collective sigh of relief. Liam couldn't explain how it had happened, how Cyril had managed to use the artifact to stop the syndicate's forces, but he could feel the weight of it. The galaxy was safe for now, but Cyril's condition had taken a toll on her. Her life force was nearly gone, and despite the quiet victory, the reality was that she might not survive this. "Cyril," Liam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He touched her cheek gently, trying to rouse her. "You have to wake up. Please." Her eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened, her glowing eyes meeting his, though their light was dimmer than before. "I'm here," she murmured, her voice weak but filled with the same quiet strength that had kept them both going. "Liam, I did it. The syndicate, they're gone." Liam's chest tightened as he held her hand, relief and sorrow mixing together. "You did it, Cyril. You saved us all. But you're paying the price for it. We need to get you help." She shook her head faintly, her lips curling into a tired smile. "It's too late for me. But you can still do so much. You're human, Liam. You have that spark, that unexpected creativity. You can rebuild. You can stop the syndicate from ever rising again." Liam didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to accept that Cyril, the woman who had trusted him, the one who had sacrificed everything, might slip away before he could even find a way to help her. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head. "You're not giving up. We'll figure something out. You're not alone in this." Cyril's smile widened just a little. "You already did your part, Liam. You've proven that humanity is stronger than the syndicate ever thought possible. You've already won." Tears welled up in Liam's eyes, but he blinked them away. He wasn't going to cry. Not yet. Not until he had done everything he could for her. "I'll keep fighting, Cyril," he said with determination. "I'll make sure they never come back, and I'll remember what you did for all of us." Cyril closed her eyes, her breathing growing softer. "You will, and maybe I'll be watching. Somewhere out there." Liam sat with her, holding her hand in silence as the weight of the situation pressed down on him. The battle was over. The galaxy was safe, for now. But Cyril's sacrifice had created a hole in his heart that would never heal. In the coming days, the rebels would rebuild, and the outposts would be restored. But Liam's journey wasn't over. He had a new mission, to ensure the peace Cyril had fought for, and he would make sure that her legacy, the courage of a woman who sacrificed everything to save the galaxy, would never be forgotten. Liam stood up, his resolve stronger than ever. The galaxy had a chance to heal, and he would do whatever it took to make sure it stayed that way.